Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Runners Roundtable. It is the Beyond Pace season, and this season is full of stories and memories and all the reasons why we love running and what running teaches us through the hard moments, the easy moments, the joyful moments, the sucky moments. Running is incredible, and I'm grateful that so many people have said yes to being on the podcast. And this episode is dedicated to Angela Anastasi. And I am grateful that you said yes because I want to dive in deep to this. I guess maybe it's your philosophy of running being a choice. And the reason why I want to dive into that, it's because my brain is going a little bit overactive, thinking about summer running and running in the heat and running in the humidity and thinking, training for marathons and all of that. And one of the things that I try to come back to is remembering that I am choosing to do this. I am choosing to do this right now. I am choosing to do this hard thing. I am choosing to wake up early, to run. I'm choosing to show up for myself and to move my body. So I want to dive into that with you. And I also want to talk about, I'm sure we'll get into it, but just your experience with running marathons. And if you've got, I think maybe we'll get into that, but like the difference between running a marathon major and then running a marathon that is not a major,
Mhm.
and how that, not so much, I don't want to talk about like the logistics of the races. I want to talk more about kind of the emotional experience of those events. And I say that for myself because I've only ever ran majors. I did one marathon that was not a major, and I was in many ways just so disappointed because I'm like, where's the crowd? Where are the people? Where's the celebration?
Yep,
Just
yep.
where is the excitement? So I want to kind of get into all of those things, and I promise we'll get to those things, and I'll keep us like a little train chugging along. But before we get into those specific things, I wanted to ask you to introduce yourself to us. And it's a three-part question. It's who are you? What's your running story? And what's your current relationship to running?
Okay, well, thank you so much, Stephanie, for having me tonight. I'm so excited we got to connect. I believe through the Roadrunners Coaches of America group, RRCA, I think that's the right thing that it stands for. But it is actually, I know this will air in a month, but it's also Global Running Day. So I'm really excited that we're connecting today. Who I am, I live in Hoboken, New Jersey. I lived in New York City in Manhattan for many years. So this will come full circle in a moment. But I do still identify as a New Yorker, I think. But I work in the legal industry as my day job, but have really committed to making running a huge part of my life. And I am fortunate that with my career, I've been able to balance both. It is my biggest hobby. People ask, what do you do for fun? I'm like, I run. I just run and run and run and run. I wish I had something more interesting to say. um, I coach groups, I coach individuals. And as you kind of already hinted at, I run several marathons myself. So I have, I just completed my 10th marathon in April, which was a different kind of experience, kind of relating back to your running non majors question. Which leads me to my relationship with running right now, which I would say over the spring has actually been in a place that I really have not experienced up until now. I think I had kind of lost the why. We always talk about the why. Why do you do this? And as we mentioned, my mantra has really, over the past few years, solidified into running as a choice. I get to do this. I choose to do this. Nobody's making me do this. Um, and that choice became really hard this spring. I ran two marathons back to back. I don't always recommend that as a coach, but It happened by accident. It was too late to withdraw from one of them. Um, we had a very, very difficult winter in the Northeast. A lot of people, including myself, were doing 17-mile runs on treadmills, which was not enjoyable. And so I think it brought me, after my last marathon to a place where I kind of hated it. And that's okay. We're not always going to love this. And again, knowing that it was my choice, actually took a break from it. I chose to stop running. And so I took pretty much a full month off. And then I am easing back into it now. I myself have a great coach, and she's always saying, if it's not making you joyful, if it's not bringing you joy, don't do it. And so I waited until I had enough time to feel that joy again. And thankfully, about a month after my race, I woke up one morning and wanted to go for a run. And I ran with no watch, no GPS tracker, no idea what my paces are. I actually end up doing a half marathon with no watch later that month. Still to this day, don't know what the time was, but just really in that kind of healing phase of doing it because I wanted to do it and because it was making me happy, not looking at times, not looking at paces, being out there because I wanted to be. And now I'm gearing up to enter another training cycle because even when we hate doing this, we always come back to liking it somehow. And I think I'm in a really good place. I think that time away with that little bit of tension between me and running, and then taking that time to recover and take a break from it and learn to like it again, has been really beneficial. So that is where I'm at right now.
And when did you start running?
I ran on and off my whole life. I ran in high school. I ran not competitively, just for fun in college. I didn't really start racing until probably 2016 or 17, so about 10 years. And I signed up for a half marathon with one of my friends, thought it'd be fun. Had never done one before, was like, yeah, sure. And then one thing led to another, and now I am a marathoner.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting when we think about longevity in the running space and how we have to pivot in order to make it last as long as we want it to last, because the burnout is real. The feeling of running being a chore is real, right? Like when you're just
Hmm.
dragging, like when it feels like it's a drag, like that stuff is real. And I appreciate you sharing your experience, because we talk about, or maybe people have heard the term, right? Like the post marathon blues,
Hmm.
right? Like you
Hmm.
hear that post marathon blues of you just met your big goal, now what? And you're kind of lost. But we don't really talk a lot about, okay, you just did this incredible thing and now you're so burnt out from having done it that
Yep.
actually what you need is a break. It's not that you're lost. It's not that you need the next goal. It's kind of like, I need some space so that I can miss you, so that I can want to continue to do
Yeah.
it. And I'm curious for you, in that time that you took off of running, would you still call yourself a runner?
That question is so interesting. And I actually just had a discussion with one of my fellow coaches about this a few weeks ago because I said something like, oh, I'm just jogging right now. And he said, do you want to be called a jogger or do you want to be called a runner? I was like, well, I'm not a jogger. I think you're always a runner. I think, and like I said, I've reflected on this. I think just because you are not training for a marathon or even running a marathon, there's great 5Ks. There's people that run and never do a race. If you are running, if you are putting one foot in front of the other, you're just as much of a runner as the Olympian runners. I think it just looks different on everybody, but um, it's definitely something that's gone through my head, right? It's like, who am I if I'm not training for a marathon? I've been doing marathons back to back now for 5 years. What am I doing with my time if I'm not training? But I think the fact is it just looks different as your life moves along, but it's always there for you, and it is always who you are, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. I obviously I agree. If anyone's been listening, like they know I agree that being a runner is, it's not just what you're physically doing, it's also like that mental state of you're a runner. If you think about running, like in my opinion, I'm like, if you're spending your days thinking, should I go for a run? Should I not go for a run? Do I want to run? Do I not want to run? I'm like, yeah, you're a runner because you're thinking about it, but there's also something to be said, and I'm going to use your word here, right? Like of that healing that you have to do afterwards. And if you've done 10 marathons in the last 5 years, that means you really haven't taken a break from being
No.
in a training cycle, right? Like you've gone from, it's almost like you've done, and it sounds like this past one was very intense with these marathons a week apart, but it also, it just means you're constantly in a state of training for something and not necessarily having that time to be like, you know what? I'm going to have an off season, or I'm not going to think about this, or whatever the case is. So, can you tell us what was that experience like for you, right? Like these 10 marathons in the last 5 years, what have been, maybe now with that little bit of distance, what would you say have been the biggest takeaways for you?
It is true that marathoning is an addictive drug. I think, we joke that no one ever just runs one. I train lots of first time marathoners and they say, this is my first and last one and done. And I say, yeah, I'll see you at the starting line again next fall. Right. But there's a lot of truth to that. Like you do, I'm very type A. I like to be organized and goal driven and I like achievements. And when you do something like this, where you are very structured for 16 weeks and you have an outcome that you're aiming for and you get a medal at the end, it becomes part of your life, right? And it for me, it was like I ran my first one. I also was just very fortunate that a couple of these opportunities came to me. So my second one was that case. I was offered a bib. I think my first one was New York, and that's November. And then I was offered a bib through a partnership to run LA, which was in March. So a little bit of downtime, but not a ton. New
Mm-mm.
York was my first one ever. Again, didn't think I was going to keep doing this, but it was an offer I couldn't refuse, right? So I was like, okay, yeah, I'll go. And then I ran 30 minutes faster in that race than my first race because the first day it was my first race. I didn't know anything. It was very hot. Had a great day in LA and I was like, oh wait, am I good at this? And that started the kind of like the achievement bug, right? I'm like, well,
Yeah.
now I want to go for a time. Now I want to have a goal. I want to hit this pace. I want to, you know, reach this next benchmark. And that's when I started sort of picking up on like, okay, let me enter this lottery. And this was still the early 2020s, so it wasn't quite as hard to get into things. Um, but I entered all the lotteries that summer and I ended up getting into Chicago. So that's how I did 3 marathons in 1 year because then I ran New York again. And I'm like, well, if I have these entries, I have to run them, right? So it was a little bit of that sprinkled in. All this to say, I've done a handful of majors and non-majors depending on what my goals are. Again, depending on if I get entries into the majors, which are really hard to get into now. And that rounded me out to number 10 this spring. And then, when you think about all of that and all that journey, and to your point, not really having any breaks in between, the most I really am ever off for is a month or two.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which someone actually pointed out to me. They were like, you haven't not been training for a marathon for 5 years. And once I really thought about that, I was like, oh, that's why this has become, to your point, burnout. And you hear the word burnout and you think of your day job. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
think I could get burnt out from my hobby, but it happens. And it felt at first, it was just so like upsetting to run that I was actually really excited to take this time off. I was like, you know what? I'm done with this. I'm not hitting my goals. I'm not having fun. I don't feel good. I'm done. Like I was actually really happy to not be running. Um, I think as it kind of progressed, like as week 3 and 4 came along, it started to be more about the identity, as you mentioned. I'm like, well, I'm not running, so I'm not, I do a little TikTok account. I'm like, I'm not running, so I'm not posting. So Now I'm not, I don't have content to build because I have no hobby. So who am I now? It got very dramatic there towards the end. But I think that was sort of, the top of the roller coaster. And when I got to that point, I realized that I missed it. And that's what got me to put my shoes on again.
Yeah, it's so funny because you are just like nail on the head or whatever the saying is of we're so used to hearing burnout when it comes to the things we have to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
School, work, parenthood in my case. And it's hard to actually understand that we can be like our hobbies can be a source of burnout for us, especially when there is no, I don't want to say that there is no break because that is part of it, like having that break. But I think it's also burnout happens when we are in this cycle of doing the same thing over and over and over again. Right. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like you're going from one marathon training cycle to another marathon training cycle to another marathon training cycle to another marathon training cycle. Whereas, my curiosity is always like, what if you did a marathon training cycle and then a 5K training cycle and then a summer of nothing and then another marathon
Mm-hmm.
training cycle? Like, does adding different stimuli or adding different running experiences help protect us from burnout? I'd like to think it does, but I think it's such a curiosity to talk about the fact that these things that we love, that we do with our extra time, that we are passionate about, that in many ways is a part of our identity and part of how we show up into certain spaces, that can be that thing that we burn out from. And when we do, it's very different from being injured, right? Like when you're injured, you can't run, like you just
Mm-hmm.
can't. But when you're burnt out, it's here, like it is
Yep.
in your mind. And that is a whole different beast to deal with. And again, now that you're kind of in this space of starting with running again and thinking about another training cycle, what has been your biggest lesson from taking this break from running?
I love how you bring the mind into it because the mind is a muscle when it comes to running. I don't know the science behind that. I'm not a doctor. Maybe it really is a muscle, but um, when it comes to running, I always tell my athletes the mind is a muscle, and it switches back and forth as to how much that takes over. And I think that's a lesson that I teach a lot, but I don't think I really listened to it myself until now. And I'll tell my runners there's some races, there's some training, there's some long run where you will go out there and you need 0% of your brain. You feel good, your legs are
Mhm.
moving, your watch is hitting your goals, you feel great. There are other days where your run is 80% in your head and 20% in your legs. And it's really easy to tell people that, right? Because, like, I know it's true. I've experienced
Mhm.
it on paper, but having actually now gone through that myself the past few months, doing those last few long runs ahead of my marathon in April were so tough because not that I didn't have the fitness, I had just done another race, 3 weeks before. I knew the fitness was there, but mentally, I did not want to get out the door. Just the thought of spending time on your feet. I'm like, what am I going to listen to for another 2 hours? I don't feel like carb loading the day before. I don't want to eat in the morning. I don't want to go through and waste another day of my weekend. Like just block after block after block I'm putting up for myself. Um, and I think that right there was the lesson where I realized like, oh, what I'm telling other people is actually extremely true. And now I have to tell it to myself. I have to tell myself, like, get in the mindset of knowing that this run is going to be 80% mental, 20% legs, and figure out how to overcome that.
Yeah, I I feel like most of my runs are like that. Like I have to do a lot of negotiating with myself to
Yeah.
just do the run. And oftentimes I have to remind myself to remember how good it feels to be done with the run in
Mm-hmm.
order to get
Mm-hmm.
started. There are days where I even negotiate with myself of like, if you do this nap, you can take a, like, if you do this nap, that's what I negotiate with myself.
You're
But I
taking a
do,
nap.
I
Yeah.
tell myself, like, if you get this run done, you can take a nap later. Like, that's
Yeah.
like, wake up early,
Yep.
do the run, and then you can get a nap. And that's sometimes,
100%.
yeah, it's like it, and it's just mental because there are days where it's like, I don't actually have time to take a nap, but just the fact that, like, I told myself you
Mm-hmm.
can take a nap later, it switches it for me. So the mind is really, really powerful. Now, I want to go, before I ask you about your memory, I want to go back to what I had mentioned in terms of like the differences that you've noticed in your marathoning when it comes to doing a marathon major and non-marathon major.
Yeah. So they're very different experiences, as you mentioned and as you've experienced. I think this is a tricky question because over the past 5 years, I have seen the majors change so much. And I can't even imagine people that have been in the game longer have probably seen it even more. Um, I've run New York a few times now, so even within that race, I've seen it change. And I think my personal experience is that the majors are incredible races, and that's what they are, they're experiences. I think you go there and you get the jackets and you soak up the crowds and you go to the events and like you have an amazing time, and those are memories that I would love to relive over and over again. Those are not where I choose to actually race. When I want to hit a goal, I'm looking for those smaller town, hometown races for a few reasons. Number one being just capacity. I mean, the majors have gotten so big. It's honestly just difficult to race them, in my opinion. Maybe this is controversial, but when you're running in a field of 50,000 people, if you have paces you're trying to hit, that's really hard for the first few miles. But the trade off there is the crowds and the energy and the resources. I mean, you're going to have water and electrolytes and everything you need and bathrooms. If I am racing to, everyone wants to hit the BQ, right? If I'm training and I want to hit my BQ, I'm looking to like something that's closer to 20,000, 10,000 even I've done. Those are races where you just pop your headphones in and you run. You see what your training did, you see what your body can do. I have chosen those races really strategically because I love to travel. And so I look for races that also might have something scenic to look at.
Mm-hmm.
And that for me is a trade off. It's like there's not going to be crowd support, but I ran one a few years ago that went from a mountain in California all the way down to a beach. I think it's literally called Mountains to
Mountains to
Beach.
beach. Mm-hmm.
Yep. um, and it was, no crowds, barely water. Like you had to go in there knowing you were fending for yourself, but like most beautiful place I've ever been. Would have never experienced that otherwise. And those races to me are sometimes even more special because it's like I didn't think running would take me here. So I think it just depends on what you're looking for. Both experiences are incredible, but just different, totally different experiences.
Yeah, and I think that's where our having coaches are really important. That's
Mm-hmm.
where I always love just searching up a race and seeing all the reviews for it in terms of just the race website is going to make it look like it's the most incredible experience. And
Yep.
it's not to say that it's
You have
not,
to read the reviews.
but read the reviews because you'll often find things about the race that you're like, oh, I didn't know that, or I didn't know I had to take a shuttle, or I didn't know I had
Mm-hmm.
to be there at this time, or I didn't know that, the first water stop isn't until mile 3, right? Like those are the
Mm-hmm.
things that in the reviews you find out a lot. So I love that you said that because the marathon majors are just getting really, really popular. Honestly, marathoning in general is really
Mm-hmm.
popular right now. And it's always important for people to remember that not every marathon is going to be the race for you or the experience for you, or much to what you said of what is your goal with this race, right? Because if your goal is to, and don't get me wrong, people go and they do these marathon majors and they get their PRs and they get all of that. But there is a really big difference feeling wise between a race that has 50,000 people and a race that has 2,000 people, right? Like that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like a big just a big spectrum in terms of how many people are on the course, how many people do you have to navigate around, what is the crowd support, what is course support, like all of that stuff really plays into it. So having a coach is always helpful in terms
Yes.
of kind of walking through that stuff, but also just read the reviews, y'all. Like there's so much information everywhere that you can read reviews and feel like you were there. Like I can't tell you how
Yes.
many different blog posts I've gone through, and it's like people that like nitty gritty to the
Mm-hmm.
detail of everything that really helps. So I appreciate you answering that question because I think, right, I've said it before where it's like I run marathons. I don't think I like that. I don't think I like training for them. And that is very much so a reflection of I live in Miami, Florida. It's hot, it's humid, it's miserable. I
Yep.
have to sometimes start my runs at 4:30 in the morning in order to get
Mm-hmm.
them done. So I think that's more of an environmental thing because once I'm at the race, I'm like, oh my God, look at all these people. I
Yeah.
love being here with runners. So it's a lot. Okay, now I want to bring us to the theme of this episode, and it is your favorite running memory. And I want to know, do you have a memory that you can share with us?
Yes, I thought about this a lot because again, when you do this so habitually, you're like, favorite memory, I don't know. I just run every day. I have, like I said, the majors have been some of my favorite experiences. I did Tokyo this spring. That was the first one I did. That was an incredible experience. And I thought about making that my memory, but I think that felt kind of basic. Like, of course, Tokyo is going to be a favorite memory. Um, I think my what really sticks with me and a memory I come back to a lot is the second time I ran New York City. I don't know what year it was, but I ran Chicago that year. Those races are back to back. Again, me doing what I would never recommend to anybody, but it's hard to get those bibs for the majors.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I ran Chicago knowing that I was going to run New York for fun. I was not going out with any times. I was just going to like have the best day ever. And that race I did, I'm not a super serious runner by any means. I'm not like, game face, intense, whatever. I'm always like, we're doing this for fun. None of us are going to the Olympics. Like that's just the truth. So have fun with it. But this race I did the hair glitter and the face glitter and the fun outfit. And I live in New York, so I had my family and friends on the course, and I just took that day to have the best time. I stopped at every person who, has some kind of silly poster or like the couple like celebrities you'll see out there. I stopped and like talked to my family. My friends were like, you've been here for 5 minutes. Like, are you gonna finish this race or not? And I'm like, I'm just so excited to see you all. Like it was just so fun. I pet a bunch of dogs. It was just that race was so not about the race itself or the finish time or like anything. I was just having the best day running. And I think being in that mindset, I mean, it's hard for people. Again, this has gotten so competitive. So, like, I find myself, it's like you say you're going to have fun and party pace, but then you get to
Mm-hmm.
race day and you're like, oh, but what do I have in me? I was able to put that aside 100% that day. And I think just, New York's a magical place. Like, running under every confetti cannon and singing with the bands and seeing the culture and the music and the art that people come up with for this race was just so it was amazing to feel so present doing something that I love so much in a place that I love so much. And that's not the experience you have every year. Some years you might want to put your head down and race, but
Mm-hmm.
that was just such an incredible day for me. So one that I definitely keep in mind.
When did you come up with or when did you feel like you solidified your philosophy of running as a choice? Do you think it was before or after that race?
Definitely after that race. I was so young. That was years ago. I was still a baby runner. I was like, whatever. I wasn't taking it very seriously. I think working with my own coach that I work with has been a huge part of that because her philosophy is like it has to be joyful. And I never really thought about putting meaning behind any of this. until I started working with her a few years ago. And that's when I started kind of thinking like, okay, why am I doing this every day? Why is it hard some days? Why is it easy some days? And I think the whole mindset of it being a choice for me really sunk in when I started working with a coach and when my own goals changed. So that was probably like 4 marathons ago now. I have a goal in mind and I want to reach it. And you're not going to reach every goal on the first time or the second time or the third time or the fourth time. Still haven't reached it. And that's okay. But when you keep missing a goal, you realize I'm like, oh, but I'm choosing to do this. I'm choosing to some days like torture myself or to some days be really happy with the outcome. And I think it was at first like a personal revelation, and then from there it became my mantra because I personally think it's a really good philosophy. Like I see runners struggle with this all the time. They have a race that they don't think went great and they're like, well, what's the point? I'm like, because you can. What else in your life can you do completely on your terms? No one's
Mm-hmm.
telling you when to be, when to do it, how to do it, where to do it. This is one of the few things in your entire life that you are the only person in control of it. It's a choice that you get to make. So that's like what keeps me going, right? I can't think of actually a single other thing where it is literally only my choice. Um, and that, I don't know, it really inspires me every day. And I like to think it inspires people I work with too.
Yeah, the reason I ask that question in terms of like when your philosophy was solidified with that is because this New York experience is one that you were really present for.
Hmm.
And I've had this discussion with other guests on the podcast that sometimes when you're in those races and you're chasing a PR or you're chasing like a very specific time goal, you miss a lot of
Hmm.
things, right? Like you miss the
Yep.
family, you miss the signs, you miss the dogs, you miss the cannons, right? Like you miss what's around you because
Yeah.
your focus is so singular towards the finish line and getting there in a specific time that when that's not your focus, it opens you up to experiencing the day, the race, the run, whatever it is differently. And I asked that question because this idea of running being a choice requires almost that same level of presence,
Yeah.
right? That same level of awareness of, yeah, guess what? I'm tired, but I'm going to be a better human after I do this run because I get
Hmm.
to do it, because this is that one thing in the chaos of my life that I get to choose to do for myself. So I see these two things as like these very parallel experiences of you have this race that where you had the best time, where it was fun, where you were so present, you got to experience all the joy. And then you have this philosophy of yours where it's requires again that same level of presence for you to be like, this is a choice, and because this is a choice, I'm going to own it, right? Like
Hmm.
this is something I'm going to own for myself. So I just think it's cool where it's like, oh, this one thing that you did physically, and it may not connect directly, but at the same time, to me, I'm like, I do see that connection of
Yeah.
that day you made a choice
Hmm.
to experience that race in that way, to experience that race in a way that when your people told you, hey, you've been here 5 minutes, like, are you ever going to finish this? You're like, yeah, okay. Like, oh shit, like maybe I need to go right
Where
now.
I gotta keep
Otherwise,
running.
like, yeah, like I'm cool. And I just feel like we all need more races like that in our lives to
100%.
soak up the community, to soak
Hmm.
up the love, to soak up the support, to really make the connection. Like I thought of this last year when I ran Chicago. I ran the Chicago Marathon last year. And I remember seeing all these little kids that were out there. And I just thought, you know, those kids they also deserve, like, they deserve the high five that they're waiting for someone
Mm-hmm.
to give them, because they're out there waiting 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 out. Like, they are out there
Yeah.
all day too.
And maybe they want to do this someday. And wouldn't it be great to be like that nice lady who gave them a high five that when they run their Chicago Marathon, they think about, it's so interconnected. I love how you put it that way.
Yeah. So, with this memory of yours in mind and thinking of New York City in specific, if it connects, I'm curious to know, how has that experience, and now that we just talked about it, like, how do you feel that experience shaped who you are, not only as a runner, but perhaps even as a run coach?
It shaped who I am as a runner because I come back to that example all the time when I think about, again, how I said I tell people we're not Olympians. Like, we have to remind ourselves a lot, especially now with social media and this running boom. It's not that serious. This is supposed to be fun. And I think that day shaped me in that way where when things get really tough, when I get really hard on myself, that is such a concrete image of the joy of all of this. It brings people together. It's something that doesn't necessarily always feel that unique anymore because it does feel like everybody's running. But in reality, I think the statistic is like 3% of humans have done this. Like, this is a really special thing that we get to do. And just remembering that day really grounds me in that. I think as a coach, it gave me, up until that point, I had had the experience of like race day, go through the checklist, run the race, look at your paces, whatever. I hadn't had the experience of like soak in the day. And, we tell runners that a lot, especially their first time marathon, like soak it all in, soak it all in. I could say that, but I didn't really know what it meant. That day, I like learned what it meant, right? To like stand on the bridge and listen to the music and hear the gun go off and like really, see the confetti pop and really, like you said, be really present. And so I explain that to my runners all the time, especially first time marathoners, which I work with a lot, who are really nervous about their time or their shoes or getting the perfect photos on the course. I mean, all kinds of things people worry about. And I explained that day and I said, this is, you hope you'll run another New York City or another Chicago or another Berlin, whatever it is, but you don't know that you will. This is a
Mm-hmm.
really special day. It's a really special thing that only 2 to 3% of humans get to do. Soak this in. You, like, your time does not matter. Nobody, you're not going to finish that race, and your friends and family aren't going to look at you and say, you didn't run sub 4. Ooh,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to be like, you ran the freaking New York City Marathon. That is so cool. We're telling everyone, like, you want your pictures to have confetti in your hair and look crazy and wild and be like tears streaming down your face because you don't know that you're going to get that experience again, right? So I think having lived it, I can really back that up now as a coach.
Yeah. And you bring up something that I truly wish we could all remember. And it's that we are not guaranteed any of it. We
I have
are
goosebumps.
not,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
like, I think of it of just, we're not guaranteed the start line. We're not
Mm-hmm.
guaranteed a finish line. And y'all, like, we are not guaranteed the time we trained for, right? Like,
Mm-mm.
there is so much of race day. And this is beyond the marathon, right? Like, it's your 5K, it's your 10K, it's your half, it's your end marathon. It's all distances where it's like, we are not guaranteed any of it, right? Like, none of it. You can go on a training run and, or even just like the people, like, I've heard so many stories of runners where they're like, I got injured, I stepped wrong leaving my house and I messed up my ankle. And it's like,
Yep.
oh, so not even on the run. It's just you living your life.
Mm-hmm.
And there goes everything you had planned, right? So that, like, it is so important to remember that. And it's also, I think, even just like hearing you speak, I'm like, yeah, as coaches, we have to walk a very delicate line of supporting our athletes and hearing them and being like, yeah, I know this is important to you. And this is like, it is a big deal, but also we need to recognize that the guarantees that we have here are very, very limited. And
Yep.
while this is important, it's also not the end of the world. Like not the end of the world if we don't
It's
have
not
the
that
experience.
serious.
It's not. And I appreciate how often you've mentioned like social media because it really does confuse it. And I know I try to tell my people, my athletes, and try to remind myself of like, oh, right now it feels like everyone's training for a marathon. And it's like, no, actually, they're not. It's just the curated version of my
Yep.
reality when I hop onto social media is that I'm just gonna see more people who are training for marathons, not because more people actually are, it's because that's just what the algorithm is feeding me. So
Yeah.
I think it's so important for us to have those reminders and then, like you said, to share that with your athletes in terms of this greater discussion of how much of a choice it is, of like all of it is our choice. And while there is so much that we have the power to choose, there is also so much that we don't have control over. And I'm sure you've had your athletes freaking out over the weather. I'm sure you've been the athlete freaking
I
out of the
myself.
weather. I'm like, I've been that
Always.
athlete.
Yeah.
And it's like, what do
I
we
hate
do?
running in the heat. Like, for as much as I complained about Northeast winter, you describing Miami, I feel for you just as much because we have a we have a 10K here this weekend. It's going to be 90 degrees, and
Mhm.
already I'm like, well, goals are out the window.
Yeah. Yeah. And we
It's
have to be
hard
okay
to,
with that, right? Because
yeah,
it's
it's
the
hard to
reality
accept
is,
it.
yeah, the reality is your goals have to be out the window if you want to run safe and
Mm-hmm.
smart so that you can
Yep.
continue to
Yep.
race for a weekend where the weather isn't as warm.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now I have a series of questions for you. They're kind of rapid fire-ish, but take your time answering them. The first question is, if you could go back in time to speak to a younger runner version of yourself, what would you say?
Oh, wow. I don't know that there was a younger runner version of myself because I was like the kid who had asthma and picked daisies on the soccer field. So I actually think I would tell my younger self, like, you're gonna run marathons someday. Like, I know it doesn't seem that way, but you are.
My God. Flipping that question is, what hopes do you have for your future runner self?
I just hope that I can do this for as long as I can. I really, really subscribe to what we already reiterated and that tomorrow is not a guarantee. And so when things do get a little dark, like they did this spring, like I always just come back to that. I'm very fortunate to have the time to do this, have the body to do this, have a safe place to run, have the resources to go to races. And I just hope that I can do that for as long as I can.
Okay, this question's my favorite question, and it is, how do you celebrate yourself as a runner?
In the short term, it's ice cream. It's always ice cream. Post race, burgers and milkshakes. Post long runs, ice cream. How I celebrate myself as a runner, like mentally, emotionally, a lot of it does go back to thinking about my younger self, right? Like there's so much to celebrate here because I never thought I was going to do this. I don't think anybody ever thought I would do this. My parents definitely were like, "Wait, you run? Like, you
Mm-hmm.
didn't see that coming." So I think it's just a really exciting example of how you don't know where life will take you and allowing yourself to be open to those new experiences. And you're never too old to try something new. I got into this when I was in my 20s, which wasn't, super old by any means, but sometimes it feels like in life you're like, well, I'm locked in now, like this is life, but it's really something to celebrate that you can have these new experiences every day.
Yeah, that is the older I've gotten, I've started to call, not, I would say at this point, it's probably been like a decade that I've told myself it's an adventure. So I call
Mm-hmm.
everything an adventure. So instead of
Yep.
saying, oh my God, it's hard or it's challenging, I'm like, it's an adventure. We got lost. All right, we're going on an
An
adventure and we're
adventure.
seeing where we're going. So for me, everything's an adventure. And it
Mm-hmm.
is because of what you said in terms of just what can happen when we take the detour, right? When we think
Mm-hmm.
that life is set, but there's this little offshoot, there's this little road here, and what can happen if we can go that way? And I just want to tell everybody that life is not set.
Yeah.
And as I'm in my 40s and here I'm still kind of like, ooh, like I don't feel like I'm a grown up. I feel like I'm
Yeah,
still trying to
that's
figure it
true.
out. Like I'm still trying to figure it out. And yet, by all accounts, I'm an adult. And I'm like, well, I
Hmm.
don't I there are times where I'm like I look around and I'm like, is this actually me? Is there a
Yeah.
glitch in the matrix right now? Because
Yep.
I don't
Yep.
feel like the person who does the things that I do, and yet I am. And I do the things that I do because I said yes to the
Hmm.
unexpected, or because I was like, let's see where this goes. And then that
Yeah.
let's see where this goes ends up being one of the biggest adventures, or one of those things
Hmm.
where I'm like, wow, this is absolutely amazing. Like life is pretty
Yeah.
good, right? It's kind of like saying yes to LA, right? Like saying yes to
Right.
that race where it's like, yeah, it was a couple of months after your first marathon, but then you got to go to LA and you got to see
Hmm.
LA and you got to run there and you got to experience something totally different that
Yeah.
all because even before that you said yes to running.
Hmm.
So it's amazing. Okay.
Yeah.
This question is the easiest question you'll get. And it's just, where can we find you and how can we better connect with you?
I am on Instagram, although I don't post a ton on Instagram about running, but that's Angela A119. I'm on TikTok, which is where I do post my running content. That's just my first name underscore last name. I'm sure you'll write that down somewhere. um, I am in New Jersey and New York City. So if you are listening and you are looking for a coach or a group, you can find me in person. Just message me. And that was all the pieces of the question, right?
Yeah. Just where do
Okay.
we find you? How do we
Oh,
best connect with you?
by the time this airs, I will also be on Team Run Run. So I am starting up coaching with them, and you can find my profile and we can have a chat.
Awesome. Okay. Final question is, what are your final words for us?
Just a few, just a few words. I have so many. Of course, running is a choice. Never forget that. Um, I think just keep going and do what's working for you. That's at the end of the day, like all you have to do is put one foot in front of the other. If you don't feel like it, don't do it. If you do feel like it, do it.
That's a word.
Yep.
Angela, thank you so much for being
Thank
here, for
you.
sharing your story, your joy, and your passion for running with us. And I think that's it. I think we're good. Yeah. Y'all, we'll
Great.
see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.